Okay. So, I'm kind of out of my depth here, guys. So recently I started a Patreon account in which one of the tiers is reviewing a movie that you asked me to. If you support me on that tier, then pretty much any movie is game. Within reason, of course. I figured people would make easy requests. Maybe someone would want me to review one of the best movies ever made. Or one of the worst movies ever made. But for my first official request, I got Les Miserables from 1935. I don't think I'm the right person for this, Chief. I'm not gonna lie to you. I don't know a damn thing about Les Miserables. I've never read the book. I've never seen any of the films. The only real knowledge I have about this story is that Susan Boyle sang a song from it and became famous, and Anne Hathaway became a meme because of it.
My precious power ring, gone forever.
Strong!
That is literally it. But this guy paid me $20, so thanks, ATM. You threw me into the shark pit, and I don't know how to swim. So keep this in mind while watching this review. I'm not super familiar with this story, like, at all. I'm a complete outsider looking in. This is my introduction to the story, so if I'm being honest with you, I enjoyed it. You know, as older movies go. So from my research, I found out that this isn't exactly the best adaptation of the story, mainly that it cut a lot of stuff out of the original story. Like, for example, in the original there's 5 volumes, while in this movie there's only 3. Certain subplots were cut out, like the one involving the Thenardi... Oh, fuck off, I'm American. I don't know how the Les Miserables fan base reacts to this one, because a lot of stuff is left out. Even the ending is vastly different. In the original story, our main character dies from heartbreak after his adopted daughter's fiance cuts him out of her life after finding out that he was a criminal. But with this one, it just ends with the Inspector Javert committing suicide. Yeah, it just ends there. I guess it leads to a more happy ending, but I don't really think that was the point of the story. And again, this is a total outsider talking who's only watched one movie. So if I'm missing something, well, there you go. For me, I think what I liked the most about the story was that it was mainly about Jean and his struggle to redeem himself in a world that would never truly forgive him for his crimes. In the beginning of the movie, he's arrested for stealing food and forced to go to the galleys for 10 whole years. After he's released, he's judged by all society despite both having money and serving his sentence. It eventually gets to a point where he's forced to change his whole identity and hide his past away. He manages to create a very successful factory in a small town, and even becomes mayor just by how popular and beloved he becomes. I know this version cut out a lot from the original story, but with a lot of film adaptations, as long as the focus stays on what is truly important to the story, I don't really mind it all that much. The story of Les Miserables is about Jean trying to redeem himself, right? Well, in this movie, the focus still remains on Jean. In the first act, Jean, still trying to make his way after getting out of prison, tries to steal silverware from a priest who gave him a free room. After being caught by the police, the priest actually lies to the police for him and says they were a gift, and even gives him 2 silver candles so he can make a life for himself. Jean ends up taking the kind act to heart and makes it his main philosophy to help others whenever he can, which is why he keeps the 2 silver candles all throughout the film. I think what makes this story really engaging is the very simple story of redemption. Sometimes movies don't really need to push some message out there, rather they can just tell the story of a man trying to do the right thing. It actually reminds me a lot of Red Dead Redemption 2. I know that might sound like a weird connection, but just hear me out. And again, outsider here, total outsider. In Red Dead 2, the story is about Arthur Morgan, a member of the Dutch Van der Linde gang, who spends his entire life fighting for the gang. For Arthur, the gang isn't just people he's working with to get rich, they're his actual family. Particularly Dutch and Hosea, who he sees as his father figures, and John Marston, who's more of an estranged brother. The game has an honor system and allows the player to go down whichever path they choose, good or bad. Do you want to give that woman and kid money after they tell you they can't pay off their debt? Or do you want to tie some poor fool up and let a train finish him off?
The power is yours.
But regardless of your choices, your loyalty still falls back to the gang. Just like with Jean, the story of Arthur's redemption is less about good versus evil and more about doing what's right, which doesn't always just mean good. For example, in one mission, the character Tilly is kidnapped by an older gang she used to run with, and how does Arthur save her? By killing everyone, of course! Don't forget to loot the corpses! Following her rescue, there's actually another choice you can make. You can either spare the leader of the gang after he says he'll never bother Tilly again, or you can just kill him. And the game doesn't really care because what's important to Arthur, aka you, is Tilly. That's what matters in the end. And I think the same can be said about Jean. For example, near the end of the movie, there's an opportunity for Jean to kill Javert for chasing him down after almost 20 years. Javert's character, I believe, is supposed to be a further representation of society, just never giving people like Jean a break despite serving their sentences already. Seriously, this guy's obsession with following the law is like insane. If the law was a woman, he'd fuck it. Hell, if it was a man, he'd probably fuck it. If the law was a fuckable object, who are you kidding? He'd fuck it. And yet, despite having Javert in a place where no one would ever know who killed him, Jean relents and frees him instead. Is this a dumb decision in hindsight? Probably, considering Javert's feelings towards following the law, but for Jean, it was the right thing to do. The priest from the beginning of the movie tells Jean that life is about giving, not taking. And Jean, yet again, took that lesson to heart. When a man was falsely accused of being Jean Valjean, the real Jean, not being able to allow an innocent man to go to jail for him, revealed himself, despite it ruining both his reputation and his new livelihood with his adoptive daughter. And again, when his adopted daughter, Cosette, had fallen in love with a man named Marius and wanted to stay and marry him, despite Jean wanting to move to England where he'd be safe. At first, he refuses because of how much he cares about her, but eventually, he's reminded of what it means to give. He's always been giving, even when it hurts him the most. That's why he decides to save Marius after he's been knocked out during the June Rebellion. For Jean, it's not about good versus evil, it's simply doing the right thing. I really enjoy stories like this, that just focus on one person's struggle to do what they think is right, even if it might be wrong in the end. That's why I love Red Dead Redemption 2's story so much, and why I really enjoyed this one. You know, again, for what it is. Again, I'm not super familiar with the story, but I did like this as a movie. I'm not much of an expert when it comes to old Hollywood, but this film was nominated for 4 Oscars back when that actually meant something, so clearly this movie did something right. I recommend checking out Big Jack Films, because he's the one who does better with the whole old Hollywood movies and stuff, so check him out if you want better, more in-depth reviews over older movies like this. As for Les Miserables, I might check out more adaptations in the future because I really did enjoy this story. But what did you guys think about this one? Was this one a good adaptation in your opinion? Was it a bad one? Did I do an okay job with reviewing it? Do you want to support me on Patreon? Too heavy-handed? Okay. Never mind. Never mind.
We're invincible. Trust in me. We're invincible. Don't you see? We're invincible.
He took my childhood and his